Kick things off? You want me to go ahead and get things rolling for us?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll.
Okay, awesome. So everyone, thank you very much for taking time this morning with Zix and CTComp for a layered security approach in a post-COVID world webcast. My name is Tom Riggio, Vice President of Sales with CTComp, and I have Paul Chavez with me as well, Senior Product Marketing Manager with Zix. We'll both be your hosts today and walk through some conversations around different layers of security with both services that CTComp provides and solutions that Zix offers to everyone. With that, Paul, maybe we could kick to the next slide. That'd be great. So just a little bit about CTComp. We absolutely take a layered approach to security. Who we are, we've been in business since 1983. We support a variety of different industries, including K through 12 education, finance, a little more specific to credit unions and banking, local banking, healthcare, a little more specific to hospitals and assisted living centers, nonprofit organizations, manufacturing, professional services, and local state government. We do have a nice collection of folks on this call today that stretch from manufacturing, credit unions, banking, local state government as well. So on this call today. So I do want to encourage people to ask questions as we go through the webcast, just to kind of get some good conversations going. So we are here. We're your local. Sorry, we're your local provider to Connecticut. Sorry, Paul. And we are your local provider to Connecticut, helping you design, budget, procure, deploy, and support your infrastructure day after day, year after year. And we do offer a large portfolio of solutions and services. You can see these to your screen here, but we extend essentially from end user help desk all the way through disaster recovery services, touching on aspects of firewalls, compliance, voice systems, security, wireless server storage, all that good stuff. One in particular I'll highlight on the applications is Office 365. We're going to talk a little bit more about that even today. So a bit more on our approach to security is first, when we think of compliance, we're aligning to different standards that we may have to comply with, which could be cyber insurance, NIST framework, GDPR. As we review that with different clients, we're going to take time to essentially figure out what it is that we need to meet from a demand perspective of compliance, implement those solutions, remediate, review, remediate, kind of for the life of what we do. As you see in the portfolio side, we have a list of different services that align to that, which would be things like networks, which are auditor and data classification services, SOC and SIEM as a service, network vulnerability scans, advanced firewall management, endpoint security, MFA, and Microsoft 365 and Azure cloud assessments. And I will, of course, say that with Zix, we do a lot around security, archiving, kind of as a platform with Zix, certainly aligning to what they offer and complementing your infrastructure. As we go through this, I do want to, we're very excited to offer this cloud assessment. So for taking part in today's call with us, we're going to provide to you a 365 and Azure cloud assessment, which you'll end up receiving documentation based on your tenant structure with potential risks that you may have around those environments. And we'll provide a 1-hour consulting review to help you understand what it is that you're seeing that we've actually put together for you and pulled from those environments. You're going to see here, it does require you to register. So after this webcast, probably tomorrow, you'll see an email from CTComp that will have the recording of the webcast itself, some additional information about services that we provide, and the link to register. But you do need to register, and when you do register, we'll follow up accordingly with formal scheduling and review. So we're very excited to offer that, and hope that you take us up on it. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Zix so they can continue through the webcast.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Again, so my name is Paul Chavez. I'm the head of product marketing here at Zix. And one of my jobs is really to really focus on and understand the current landscape of various industries, of various markets. And as many of you know, the pandemic has forever changed the business landscape. Even today, as we are all getting vaccinated, as we are as all of these states are lifting their stay-at-home and remote work policies. Even today, a lot of the implementations, innovations that many organizations have gone through are going to stay, right? And we've seen that, right? I mean, 40% there's been a 41% increase in cloud service usage overall, and it'll continue to increase. And this includes, things like Office 365, Salesforce, Box, Dropbox, those types of business cloud-based applications are forever going to be used and more organizations, as you probably have experienced, of using and being comfortable with a lot of that information now being at the cloud. There's a statistic that Gartner had put out in regard to some of the innovations that have been required during this time. 5 years of business innovation in the last 18 months, right? I mean, that's unheard of. And with that, I mean, there are some challenges, right? There were challenges, I'm sure, that many of the teams that you work with working remotely, there is a sense of fatigue, certainly, in the sense of putting your guard down in this landscape, just in the fact that you're not going anywhere, right? That you are comfortable in your home, you feel safe in your home, and ultimately, all of that has to do with or increases one, the complexities of how we work, as well as increases the risks. And this is a just a graphic of and it could be agnostic to any business that is a multi-tiered, partner-focused, creative focused business that builds products, software, and works with external individuals to get the job done, right? There's a level of communication channels that are currently being leveraged today and have been more adopted, that have gone, specifically, certainly from an email perspective, we continue to use that from both a professional and personal level, but that's also expanded to collaboration apps, to consumer file transfer apps, and so on. And so ultimately, there's a lot of information out there. And how do you make sure that that information remains safe and secure, not only within your network but even externally? And how do you make sure that you are practicing good business practices as you continue to secure your data and keeping and reducing the risk of your organization, right? There's a lot of more tiers that we're dealing with, and increasing those opportunities also increases opportunities for threat actors to take advantage of some of the gaps that you may not be thinking of. And with certainly with Microsoft and M365, I'm sure that many of you are either on the platform or looking to adopt that platform. And it ultimately is. There's an expectation of it's going to help us work from anywhere, right? It's going to help us reduce risk exposure because of the integrated components within Microsoft 365. And certainly that's an absolute expectation. It's critical for a business, right? But it ultimately doesn't come without challenges, right? I mean, there are unavoidable challenges. As good as Microsoft is, I mean, we use it. We're a critical partner with Microsoft, but there are certainly gaps and certainly things that are unavoidable, and where CTComp with Zix ultimately can help close those gaps and fill those puzzle pieces in the context of providing uninterrupted business experience that puts your employees, your partners, and your customers privacy and security in mind. And so that's where ultimately we're here to talk about is absolutely gain that confidence of using these third-party applications like M365, but at the same time understand the risks and where CTComp and Zix can help complement that as well. So particularly when it comes to security, Microsoft actually has the highest exposure, for example, for zero-day vulnerabilities. And I'm sure you've heard it today, and you've heard it in the news. There's a big zero-day disclosure that Microsoft announced on Microsoft Exchange platform that really put over 60,000 customers at risk of not just them being compromised today, but ultimately of those organizations now being a platform to launch subsequent attacks, right? So the feeling of this, and as well as the SolarWinds breach, right? That impacted over 40,000 of their customers. So there's 100,000 customers out there now or 100,000 launch points that potentially give opportunities for cyber criminals to then launch subsequent attacks. So that's kind of the basis, or the magnitude of some of the challenges that organizations face, like yourselves. But at the same time, certainly you can deploy all of these different solutions, but you certainly don't have the resources or the time to do that, and that's where CTComp with Zix is going to help provide that kind of a layered approach and subsequent complementary components to your Microsoft infrastructure. And when I think about the problem, the challenges of security, I think about a lot of business leaders always ultimately look at the headline. Oh yeah, Microsoft disclosed zero-day. Oh, am I at risk of that? And that's absolutely valid questions. But at the same time, the threats themselves are more than just that headline. There is a very well known process, and just in terms of in general, right? As a thought process of launching attacks and completing a specific goal, there are certainly steps that threat actors engage in to get to that point. And so and they're not now, and as they're not just attacking the large organizations, the Fortune 500s, right? They're going through different ways and focusing on smaller organizations, supply chain partners, for example, to subsequently attack not just those smaller organizations, but the partners that they work with. And so that's a key point in thinking about, well, I'm just a smaller organization. Why should I be worried? I could just use some of the integrated security solutions within Microsoft. Well, these threat actors, they know how to get through Microsoft. It's easy to test against. And so that's where you need that layered approach to focus on stopping them at every point of their kill chain, their attack or cyber threat life cycle. And there's a lot of opportunity here, and one where from Zix side, we focus on areas of, well, there are no solution is going to be 100%, right? So in terms of preventing every single attack. And so ultimately it's looking at these activities from reconnaissance, right? Identifying a target. Threat actors will seek out weak targets or ones that best determine that they'll be able to best determine how they can attack through a level of either looking through LinkedIn profiles, certainly from social media posts, but also from technical and tactical aspects, and we'll go through some of those as well. And then launching those attacks, we know that there's different ways of doing that, and ultimately you'll need to provide those levels of protection. But subsequently, there are times, absolutely, and ones where you have to be prepared of ultimately those compromises. That level of infiltration. What do you do then when they're in there? How do you detect them? How do you identify? And then ultimately, for the threat actor, it's, now it's a cat and mouse game, right? Invading, moving across the organization to ultimately completing that mission, whether it's collecting intel, executing that mission goal of extracting, exfiltrating information out of the organization. And so, diving down deeper as to the applications of security, in these, in this attack lifecycle or the cyber threat lifecycle, a lot of the biggest impacts to an organization is still through email, right? In terms of reconnaissance missions that threat actors do that we know and we see, they still continue to leverage email. Why? Because it's easy, right? It's extremely easy to launch and formulate, an email. And you know what? It doesn't always have to be a malware, within that email or URL within that email for reconnaissance, right? It can be a harmless email with gibberish, just ones that will pique interest to an individual to, one, respond, but two, also to test out an organization's infrastructure, right? I mean, if this is for an example of a really random email that I actually received, and the thing is like, typically, for example, if me as a user didn't exist, right, the gateway, traditionally would send a bounce message to the attacker, to that sender, saying that this recipient doesn't exist, and it'll provide some header information of where it came from, and even if you're using a hosted solution, what hosted solution. So there's a lot of intel there that even when I, as the user, didn't get tricked into doing anything, now the attacker has some information about my organization. And so those are the things that, as an organization, you've got to be able to protect and ensure that you're building the right policies. And that's where CTComp and Zix certainly come into play of having and providing that level of guidance to ensure that your configurations are optimized to reduce the amount of information that's being sent out of your organization. At the same time, again, as I mentioned, there are other techniques that threat actors use, web-based attacks, direct database level of attacks where you're plugging in, accidentally plugging in malware, through your USB drives. And one of the things that to remember in terms of that level of infiltration, or once that initial compromise happens, is that in most cases the threat actors don't have access to the systems that they need. And ultimately it's then about identity and an identity-based analysis or security audit of what's happening to the user's information in regard to login information. And so, things like persistent passwords, or the ability to keep or change passwords and elevating that standard user to the administrator, those are the things that certainly threat actors will do to maintain persistence, as well as to navigate and move laterally in the organization. And again, things that as an organization you've got to be cognizant about, that even if a threat gets through, how am I able to detect a potential actor in my organization? And we know that, again, SMBs, small organizations are being exposed to these types of sophisticated techniques, and certainly having a partner that understands that is going to be critical. And then again, of course, once you're inside, I mean, who knows what they're doing, right? I mean, that's where, and even if you were able to identify, detect, stop that cyber criminal, are you comfortable with using the data that's still in place at that point? And that's where things like backup and recovery and using clean copies and having clean copies of your data becomes critical, right? In terms of keeping that level of productivity, even in the face of attack, as well as maintaining that level of confidence for your employees, your partners, your customers, that my data is still clean. Even if as we've potentially may have been compromised, I can always go back and fall back, or if forever, God forbid that it's been locked up or encrypted via ransomware, I know that I have backup a clean copy of that data to then restore and then get back to work and maintain my level of productivity. So with Zix and CTComp, I mean, we think about it as a layered approach in the context of, a lot of the frameworks out there, but simplified, certainly. There is a, there are levels and necessities of different frameworks, like, for example, NIST and laying out a lot of the necessary and very different security applications to help protect, detect, respond and recover from those types of threats and attack cycles. So here at Zix, we think about it too, and we try to simplify it even more, given kind of the nature of the different organizations that we work with, and the applicability of solutions, right, and making it as least complicated as possible. So when we talk about protecting, that's the ability to prevent attacks from ever getting into the network in the first place. So with our advanced email threat protection solution, and enabling multi-factor authentication through M365 Azure, that really goes a long way from, one, preventing a potentially malicious malware from getting into the network, or even as your team members may click and unknowingly click on a malicious credential-based phishing link, that multi-factor authentication would prevent, even if that user and password were potentially exposed. So doing everything you can initially on the front end, as well as advanced email encryption on the front end, to preventing any potential compromise from getting into the network, or any potential snooping of the SMTP conversation, because we know, in the examples of Microsoft Exchange as well as SolarWinds, that even it started with an email in regard to phishing campaigns of compromising those user credentials. Preventing that in the first place is going to be certainly that first key critical requirement. Another aspect of that, as we move further into that cyber threat lifecycle that we talked about, breaking that chain with a detection or security auditing monitoring solution. So I know that CTComp absolutely does a lot of security vulnerability assessments. They do continuous monitoring. They also have the ability to leverage the components within Zix through our security audit solution that really focuses on privileged access, administrative controls, and good practice policies of maintaining a least privilege approach, right? I mean, there shouldn't be 50 admin level users in your organization, right? We will help detect that, so that even as potentially a threat actor may or may get through, or even just in general, reducing and limiting the risk of exposing a high level password and user combination. That's where that detection, continuous detection and monitoring response application, is essential of having this infrastructure and this partner doing that for you, so that you're leveraging those best practices to keep and maintain that confidence for your employees and your partners. And then finally, a level of response, right? That response of, well, there are latent threats, right? I mean, there's a lot of, thousands of different tactics and advanced tactics of being as evasive as possible that cyber criminals leverage. And it's that ability to remediate even as you found suspicious behavior within your network. And that's locking down, things like locking down a user once you identified some suspicious activity. That's removing, or what we call message retraction, through our advanced email encryption solution, or email threat protection solution, that pulls messages that may be unsafe or unwanted directly from the inbox. That's again, backing up and recovering from that potential compromise. Even as I know that maybe again, ransomware was launched, I don't have to pay that ransom, right? I can recover from a backup that was just a few hours before that, or a day before that, and I can continue with my day while I further lock down my systems, right? I can search and use data loss prevention through advanced email encryption to identify if sensitive data is being exfiltrated through email out of my network. These are the capabilities that we enable CTComp to engage in with their response practice, as well as their preventative and detection practice, to helping you really secure and layer on and complement your infrastructure, so that you can maximize your productivity and focus on the business that you are really designed to do, and not have to worry about this. And so ultimately how this works, right, Zix Secure Cloud is a cloud-based infrastructure, cloud-native infrastructure, which has many components, right, through email threat protection, email encryption, security audit, as well as that archiving and backup and recovery space, to help, we're talking about security today, but in the context of compliance, and if you're dealing with regulatory compliance of keeping and storing and having to make data available for things like auditing and regulatory compliance, and even we're reducing times for audits as well, we can do that, right? And so ultimately, how do we help, right? I mean, you've got that infrastructure of your Microsoft infrastructure that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. You may be looking to use and leverage more applications out there. And so where CTComp and Zix can help, right? We can provide that business resilience and continuity solutions to ensure that even if Microsoft 365 fails, right, there's no real risk ever of losing your data, or interrupting at least your primary business application, interrupting email. We can help enable that multi-layered security defense, right, through our advanced email threat protection solutions, our security audit solution, and backup and recovery. In addition, again, we didn't talk about it today, but we can help accelerate that compliance maturity, right? And Microsoft in itself is implementing a lot of their compliance solutions. It's a very steep learning curve, right? And one where using things like archiving and encryption and secure file sharing through Zix can make that journey from several months to just days, a matter of days. And then lastly, combined with CTComp, we can provide you with that level of support, right? Whether it's Microsoft support, whether it's a question about concerns about security exposure, compliance, pre and post sales, right? We work with our partners and provide them with the direct access to technical experts, Microsoft experts, and so on, so that you get that question solved immediately. All right. And with that, I'll hand it over back to Tom to kind of just talk about the Microsoft 365 and Azure Cloud Assessment again, and just reiterate some of the opportunities and promotions that he has.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And that was fantastic. And I'm going to pause here for a moment and before even remind everyone of this, but I just want to add a little bit that'll kind of punt us. Well, I guess let me say this, and then I'll kick us into our Q&A. But so just as a reminder, right, we have this offering that we're for folks. We have this offer, for you taking part today. We really would love to do this for you. We have a tool set that we work with. You would have to grant us access to your 365 and Azure cloud environment, but we would run some reports, run some tools, get some data, and go through that with you guys. It would be yours to keep and work with as you need to. You could engage us further if you wanted to. to provide more services around that. So please take us up on that. We will send that link out to you, everyone that was on the call in the meeting today. So with that, Paul, I just wanted to, as I was going through this, listening to you and thinking about this, I wanted to remind everyone to take yourself off mute, kind of get your fingers warmed up in the keyboard if you need to, and jump in here for any questions and feedback that you may have. Because what I wanted to talk about for a moment was kind of what we're doing every day with Zix, what we're doing more importantly every day with our customers, and kind of how this world's aligning every day with kind of what I would call consolidation of platforms from kind of these elements that you talked about: security, archiving, compliance, encryption, file sharing. A lot of folks have Exchange on-prem, or more so 365 today, just to kind of state that. Other folks, right, still may have other third-party email providers. In addition to that, customers of ours also have different different vendors doing different things, right? They may have one vendor doing file sharing for them. They may have one vendor doing email security for them. They may have Microsoft providing, encryption and email security. So when you think of it from that perspective, the one thing that we see that our customers really like with Zix, and that we like as a partner, is that we can layer in a Zix portfolio of either the entire suite of offerings that you have, or just compartmentalize, right? Zix can just do the security portion of it. You can just do the archiving portion. You can just do the the availability side of it. But if you start really thinking about all the different pieces, some of the customers already have some of this, and they're looking how to maybe get one single vendor that can offer a better service across all of these kind of stacks of technology and threat areas. And so as we work with customers, I'll give you one example. Customers have, maybe they got Exchange on-prem and they've got archiving either hosted or on-prem as well. A strategy is to, move forward with the Zix deployment so they can ingest the archive that's either local or hosted, move into that platform for ongoing, experience and archiving. Oh, and by the way, I might as well turn on my security portfolio for email scanning and link safe, safe link scanning and all those kinds of things. And oh, by the way, I want to back up my 365 environment. I can do that with Zix. We've also had customers even looking for different ways to handle encryption, maybe even your own internal, HR rules and restrictions you want to put in place, as well as how you're sharing files as well. And so I know it's a lot and it's repeating what Paul said, but it really does happen. We do spend a lot of time working with customers to think that through, figure out a strategy, because everyone's always looking at kind of what am I doing today, where am I going tomorrow, and who would I want to partner with. And Microsoft has done an amazing job with their 365 platform, and we see people just wanting maybe a little bit more, right, to what you said originally, Paul. So we love talking about that stuff. So I'll take a pause there for a moment. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything. Jeff, if you see anybody with any questions in the chat, or if anybody just wants to fire a question over, jump on the call here and fire away. So we're here to have some of those conversations if you'd like.
Yeah, I just add, I mean, one of the, the key differentiators in terms of our level of commitment to our partners as well as their customers is our support and our customer success. And what I mean by that is when you call into Zix, there's this level of and it could be things related to what's happening to your concerns about a targeted threat or anything like that. And one of the things that we do is focus on ensuring that you have direct access to like a threat analyst, and to be able to talk with them and maybe augment or provide, or we'll give you recommendations and maybe changing your security policies directly within the interface, so that you're prevented from being exposed to subsequent attacks. And that's something that's really unique to Zix, is to we're not here to segment or provide multi levels of tiers of support, you're going to get that level of support on that first specific call. And so, again, really focusing on that commitment of ensuring that you get a great experience from the Zix customer success team as well.
Yeah, and I'll
Paul, this is Jeff here.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see if we can summarize very clearly here. A lot of questions that clients end up having, and one question somebody asked in the Q&A is layered security needed on top of Microsoft security already. So we have a client who's already utilizing Microsoft Office 365. And what they're looking to identify is very simply the added level of security that Zix is offering, that Microsoft kind of stops, if you will.
Right, yeah. So Microsoft, I think, it attempts to do everything for, and be everything for everyone, right? And it's certainly a valiant effort, but you have to think about the impacts that are happening today, right? And, I turn to, again, that sort of SolarWinds and Microsoft zero-day breaches, and while they may have security solutions that are intended to stop those types of threats, the reality is that threat actors know how to get around Microsoft. And again, if you think about, like, for example, E3 or E5, or there is a level of, absolutely enable some of the components that they have, but the biggest single threat in terms of being able to successfully bypass their environment is through email. And as soon as, when we found out about the SolarWinds breach and the Microsoft zero-day, we did an analysis on, our customers, and none of our customers were effectively exposed and never even had to deal with any potential threat around or at that, right? We focused on ensuring and securing that email security layer, because we know that that's the top attack vector for most organizations. So, even as they have, things like Exchange Online Protection, right? Having a third-party security vendor that layers on top of that is going to be critical, right? Because as I mentioned before, preventative measures are certainly going to be the top priority and giving you the best chance of eliminating those threats. And then the second component of that is really around, the complexity of the M365 environment, and in regard to things like security monitoring of, your identities, security monitoring of changes of suspicious behavior, of just of like changes within the mailbox rules. A lot of those things, I would say that Microsoft, the complexities of implementing that is I would say not ideal, right? And that's where, for example, our security audit capabilities come into play, that we're looking at something very specific to what threat actors do, right? They'll compromise an environment. They will use, your email account to now launch new attacks, right? So that we have actually the ability to identify and detect that kind of activity within the network. That's something that Microsoft isn't focused or provide in that context. So, there's a lot of things that Microsoft does well, but at the same time, cyber criminals are targeted and focused on bypassing their security controls. So you absolutely need that third party from an email threat protection perspective, from a security audit perspective. And then lastly, the simple fact is Microsoft doesn't offer backup, right? In their SLAs, they strictly state that, they're certainly not responsible for your data. They'll protect the infrastructure as best as they can. But they also recommend that you back up data on a third-party solution, in the event that, it becomes inaccessible. Microsoft had 15 interruptions, in the past, just in the beginning of these past 3 months, right? That was inaccessible. Customers had inaccessible access to their data, at given times, 15 different times. And, they have an actual site that they will publish this information. So this is, publicly available information. And those interruptions with our backup solution, you have direct access to maintain that data. We can restore from a file level perspective, and then even extend that outside of Microsoft as well to things like Dropbox and Box and Salesforce data, so that your productivity isn't impacted. And so there's a lot of different layers there that we absolutely complement the existing security solutions of Microsoft.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Makes a lot of sense. And I can say just from our own experience with clients, when it comes to ransomware and network resources getting locked down, it does come down to backup and restore. You really can't trust. And that leads into another question a client here just asked, is how much effort do these attackers really put into, getting into your network and asking for six-figure ransoms? Like, what are they doing? And you've mentioned email being one of the highest vulnerabilities. So, Zix is a good solution for that. How much effort do they really put in, to this, as the client would like to know? And again, experience has identified that if they do get through, rather than paying that six-figure ransom, which some companies do, you just can't trust all the time. It comes down to being able to restore.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we're finding is that it is actually these days a lot easier to do because there are infrastructures, threat actors for hire or infrastructures for hire. These are compromised networks that people sell off of the dark web, that you can then launch a phishing attack or a ransomware attack and not even be detected. I mean, these are the things that a lot of the lower commodity-based attackers do. Certainly once you get to the APT level attackers that are state-sponsored. I mean, if you think about like the SolarWinds and the Microsoft, I mean, these are funded attackers that were coming from Russia, China, for example, that are funded and do the actual research of well, who is, and one big example, right? I'll give you was CrowdStrike, right? So CrowdStrike is a very, very high-end endpoint solution, very well-known security organization, and the attackers didn't attempt to attack CrowdStrike directly. They did research around, well, who are CrowdStrike's partners and suppliers, and they actually found out that some of those partners were on M365, right? And they were smaller organizations. They were able to gain access to those organizations' emails, and then attempted to then send CrowdStrike account takeover based attacks, right? BEC attacks from that compromised account. Now, luckily, Microsoft was able to identify, the compromise in those third-party suppliers, but that's a key example there that, they're highly motivated to be able to do this because they can gain a lot of information, either, technical IP from these security organizations, but at the same time, as you mentioned, ransomware, BEC attacks. I mean, it's very cheap to send email, and that's why they do it. But the results for them is beneficial. I mean, a five-figure, even a five-figure reward of being able to pay the ransom for the threat actor, right? It's pennies on the dollar for them to be able to send these types of attacks to organizations of a smaller size that are more willing to pay.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about the Zix environment? There's the questions of, when there's multiple security solutions at hand and it comes down to the client having to manage those. Is there a way to simplify, the management?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you think about just kind of when we talk about that layered approach and making it as simple as possible and reducing the amount of solutions that you ultimately need, right? I mean, we view it as, I mean, I think everything outside of an endpoint solution, you can certainly integrate and use a single interface through Zix to manage the solution. So that's, email threat protection, email encryption, secure file sharing, archiving, backup, security audit. I mean, all of that is managed through that single user interface, and it's the infrastructure of the provisioning users, applying policies, and then ultimately generating reports directly from those and automatically being sent or getting it sent to you. As much as you can consolidate, a lot of the that layered security as we've talked about today with Zix, you're only dealing with that one interface as opposed to, the 5 or 6 different ones that you would if you're looking at, kind of disparate systems, as well as your Microsoft licensing and provisioning as well. That would all be managed through the Zix infrastructure. So I think, just that in itself greatly reduces, the administrative costs as well as the overhead of having to manage it from different systems.
Right, that's very important. Yep, fantastic, thank you. See if
Jeff,
there's anyone else with questions. Yeah, go ahead, Tommy, because I was going to say, I think that wraps up the questions that I've seen come in so far.
Perfect. Okay, great. And so I'll just really a plug for Zix here. We both companies, CTComp and Zix, right? We're in business because we have customers and we support our customers with the related technology. Without that support, why would you need us? So I just wanted to echo what Paul even said too about their support. It is phenomenal. So so even though we're involved as a vendor supporting the Zix technology, and we do that in light with our customers, either onboarding and or ongoing support, our touch in many cases can be very light or minimal. So if the customer is more self-sufficient, they have their own expertise and they can work with Zix directly on a more routine basis, either onboarding or ongoing support. The Zix support is phenomenal. And so I just wanted to echo that because it really is true and it really does make a difference. And even for us supporting our customers working with Zix, if we're going through escalation and review and things like that as a partner-friendly company as well, they too have a great support structure for us supporting our customers as well. So hats off to you, Paul, and the group there for doing that, because that really resonates well.
Yep, thank you.
So Jeff, any more questions?
Nope, that wraps it up. Thank you.
Okay. Paul, everyone on the call, thank you very much for the review, and we look forward to working with everyone in the future.
All righty.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.